Welcome to today's Heartlift with Janell. I am so happy you found your way here in this very crowded marketplace of the podcast world. You are going to be so happy that you did, because today I have the incredible, the wonderful Alison Cook with us. She is the beautiful author, co-author of Boundaries of the Soul. I'm just going to tell you a little bit from the get-go here. And then you can just read all about Alison on her website and all the places and in the show notes, because I just want to get right to her wisdom and her heart and her beautiful spirit. She is an MA and a PhD. So should I call you Dr. Cook?
No, Alison's great. Thanks.
I want my PhD so bad, Alison. Oh, I will be the oldest PhD student in the world, maybe, but I'm going to do it one day. She's a counselor, speaker, and as I said, co-author of this wonderful book. Oh my goodness, it's so good. It's just so good. For over 15 years, she's helped women, ministry leaders, couples, and families learn how to heal painful emotions. Well, we're all about that here. Develop confidence from the inside out, forge healthy relationships. So you know why I love her, because she's just everything that we are. And fully live out their God-given potential. She earned her MA in counseling from Denver Seminary, and then that wasn't enough, so she went back for her PhD. And this is one thing that really does make me resonate with you, Alison, so much, because it's in religion and psychology from the University of Denver. She's certified in internal family systems, this model of therapy. And she has a certificate in spiritual leadership from Leadership Transformations, Inc. She has a counseling practice located in the greater Boston area, and she specializes in the integration, once again, of this faith and psychology, which is very important in my work. And so I know that drew me to you, and you exposit on it, you teach on it, you train on it so well. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, so happy that you're here, especially to talk about this issue of boundaries in our soul and teach us about the soul. And then another huge thing I want to introduce to my community, Stronger Every Day, is the internal family systems theory. It is something I have not introduced yet. I've introduced a lot, talked about a lot, but I wanted to learn more myself, of course, always, and really wanted my community to know. But one of the main reasons, like I said, is that you talk about boundaries in a different way. There was a watershed book, moons ago, by Cloud and Townsend. And you write about that throughout this series that they wrote, Cloud and Townsend, the Boundaries series, which is now a movement. They acknowledge the inner work that accompanies setting healthy external boundaries with others. A chapter called Resistance to Boundaries in their original book gives some examples of internal boundary issues. So that's a lean in for everybody here. We're talking more today about the boundaries inside of us that we can have. You're going to give us a permission slip, and I'm so excited. I need this. And there are these internal boundary issues that are important to address: angry reactions, guilt messages, unresolved grief and loss, fear of anger, and fear of the unknown. So Alison, here from the get-go, just help us understand a little bit more about this idea of setting boundaries with overwhelming parts of yourself. And then, if you want to, lead into what spirit-led self-leadership is all about. This is pivotal.
That's a great set. You perfectly set up where we are, because as you said, our book kind of zooms in on that internal work. So when you say, I need to set boundaries, but almost always inevitably there's this internal feeling of guilt, of
Right.
I'm going to be a mean person. There's a lot of thoughts attached to it. Or I don't want to make anybody mad. I don't want to hurt anybody. So we have what in the IFS model, as you touched on, it's a model of therapy, what we call parts of us that have been sort of nature and nurture. If you think of the Enneagram, you and I talked a little bit about this already, where if you're an Enneagram 2, you might have a real strong helper part, right? So you're going to have a lot, and that's also been conditioned
Yeah.
throughout your childhood. Your parents probably, you've been rewarded for these. This is the way you learn to cope in the world. So you might have a part of you that is really fearful of hurting somebody, or let's say you have a part of you that gets really angry, and so let's say you're someone who you're fearful of setting boundaries because you couldn't come on too strong, or maybe you're a worrier, and so you're just constantly overthinking, should I not, should I not, right? These are all attached to parts of us.
Mhm.
And so the work of spirit-led self-leadership is to learn to differentiate and blend from these various parts of us. They're parts of who we are. They're not all of who we are, and lead ourselves. So instead of just giving over to that initial feeling of guilt, oh, I could never do that, we talk about pausing and getting curious. Wait a minute. I wonder why I feel like I could never do that. Well, what is that about? What is that fear about? And as you take that pause and you get curious about that initial feeling, you may well realize, oh, that's a belief I've held from long, long ago. That doesn't apply to this situation. And then you're able to develop the inner reserves to be gentle with yourself, say, oh, you know what? That initial feeling isn't actually, it's valid. It's there for a reason. I don't have to beat myself up for having it, but I also don't have to act out of it. I have a choice. I have other options here of ways to approach setting this boundary. So that's kind of where we zoom in, is doing work with those first kind of in those pathways that just blaze right to those initial emotions that often are survival skills, they're coping strategies, they're hardwired into us, but aren't necessarily the best place from which to respond to a tricky situation.
Oh, I'm going to sigh a lot. I just know it. You said so many things there. One that I really want to hone in here, because even this week in sessions with clients, even this morning, a wee hour ago, it's like, oh, I can choose for myself. Wait a minute. What is the self? You know? And I think that especially within, this is why I love your integration of faith and psychology and theology as well, is so often I know I was schooled in the school of theology that self is bad. Jesus, others, you, joy. And I know you're familiar with this conversation, but help us understand that it's okay. Like, number one, I have parts. And it's okay that I can think for myself. I can choose myself.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
absolutely. Well, the problem with the way that, and it's really a modern phenomena. This isn't the way, traditionally and historically in church
Right.
leadership, thinkers understood, back to Augustine, back to Paul, back to Calvin. One of the first sentences in Calvin's Institutes is, knowledge of God and knowledge of self cannot be separated. Right. And that's from, hundreds of years ago. So
Yeah.
this is sort of a modern phenomena that we have this idea that self is bad, that we sort of bypass the self. Well, God created
Mhm.
us. He made us human flesh. The self, you can think about it in different ways, but it's the image of God in us. It's the place where the Holy Spirit comes to reside. It's our unique, personhood. And God wants us to live into the fullness of what that is. And we are in a relationship with God. Well, if you're in a relationship, that implies that there's two people involved, and you are one of those people, right? So I
Yeah.
always say to people, it's not, God isn't a dictator. We have
Mhm.
an active role to play. And the way that we do that is through really getting to know this person that is me, that God made. And that when Jesus said to love your neighbor as yourself, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. There's three relationships are God, neighbor, and self. And I don't see a hierarchy there. Maybe God is obviously, the ultimate. God interweaves through
Right.
all of it, right? But when it comes to neighbor and self, they really are related. I love my neighbor as I love myself. That's a reality. That is the more I know and understand and care for myself, the more I will be better equipped to care and know and understand others. Those things just go hand in hand. So I think that dichotomy that is really just that it's modern and it's really not helpful. And so that was one of the reasons we felt passionate about writing this book, because this whole model is presumes this idea of a self, that there's a core inside of you that has the capacity to lead these various parts of you. And as Kim and my co-author and I were learning about this model of psychotherapy that isn't Christian per se in the world of psychology, we were like, oh my gosh, they're getting at this spiritual center that Christians know to be this there's so many different ways we have to talk about it, but we landed on the spirit-led self. Henry Nouwen talks about the place inside,
Yes.
where you can hold the different emotions that you have and the different feelings that you have and the different impulses that you have without necessarily acting on them, but just being present with yourself.
Right.
So it's really a lovely kind of, I look at it trying to reintroduce that into our spiritual lives as Christians.
Yeah, for sure. And it's all about what you're speaking to. What I love, love, love about it is that self can be our leader,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think I probably can't even put words to the wrestling that I've done in my own life and then in my work with that. We sit in a church, we listen to leaders, and then we follow the leader. And we lose, at least I did. Maybe I never even knew my true self, but I feel like there's a loss that I'm even allowed to have a self, that I have to follow the leader. And the leader is not my Jesus per se. It's not God. And for me, the integration point that you helped me find was that I can trust my leader.
Yeah.
I call that person a knower, but you call that a self-led leadership, spirit-led, it's like, yeah, right. Like I can trust that.
Yeah, and we need to. We're not doing anybody any favors as a church by encouraging, especially women, to be honest, because
Yeah.
what I find is
Yes.
that men are in our culture and historically have been raised to they instinctively trust themselves, and they're reinforced for that, whereas as women we sort of are taught to trust other people. And so it's almost like for men, sometimes I think of some of my colleagues, we talk about how their work with men is learning how to trust other people and letting other people in, and this is too easy, and it's not true. There's always exceptions, but for women we know how to look to other people. It's what does it mean to look inside and trust our own inner wisdom, what God has given us uniquely. So we, in the book, we go through the famous Jeremiah passage that a lot of people have quoted: "The heart is deceitful and wicked," that, is used as evidence that we can't trust ourselves, and talk about how actually, Jeremiah is actually the very same prophet who later says, God is going to write his law on your heart, meaning
Right.
that, the Old Testament law was external, but with the coming of Jesus and the Holy Spirit, God actually is now written on our hearts, and the heart being the core or the center of your being. And so we have to start looking inward. And I always like to say, the theology part of me comes out and says, I absolutely believe in the both and. I believe in a God who is out there, who is fully other and transcendent, and the God who is immanent, the
Yeah.
God who comes to live within through the power of the Spirit. They're both important. But we don't emphasize often that internal work of tapping in to, like, as you're saying, our own self. When you talk about sitting in church and we're supposed to follow out there, well, it's a relationship, right? So what's going on, and to get back to these parts, what's going on
Thank you.
inside of me in response to where this person wants to take me, because I get a say. I get a say in that, right?
That's it right there. That's
Mhm.
where I see the huge disconnect, particularly in women. And I'm you know, in my seventh decade, so a little more elderly than you know, but it's like in my realm of women who have been raised in a very different theology in many ways, is that wow, I get a say,
Mhm.
you know, because I know myself as a child in the alcoholic home, and that trauma base is I didn't get a say.
Mhm.
So then many of my community have suffered trauma. I do a lot of trauma work. And so there is this parallel that you just take it into, you know, the church sense, or the God, my relationship with God, right? And I for eons, for decades, you know, and I hear this all the time. So I know I'm not alone. And I'm so glad your voice is here,
Mm.
because it's such a clear voice and it's such a wise voice to
Mm.
empower women that yes, it's almost like 1920, you have a vote.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
It's like I
yeah,
have a vote.
yeah,
I have a
yeah.
voice.
You get to
I
say, yeah.
I get a say in this.
Mhm. And God wants you to have a say. He gave you a voice. That voice is of God, right?
Mm,
So that's, and I really appreciate the work that you do, because so much of my work is what I see going on is sort of women, you know, my generation sort of, we're sort of in the middle. We sort of got a little bit of this. We're sort of wrestling with it.
mhm.
The younger generation, it's almost
Yeah.
an overcorrection of it's
Yes.
only my voice.
Yes,
Only my voice
absolutely.
matters.
Mhm.
And then you've got, you know, sort of the grandmothers and mothers of adult who are just like, wow, I didn't realize I could have a voice. So as women, we're all kind of working this out, and then we're trying to work, you know, thinking of Mother's Day, trying to working it out in relationship to each other. So it's such an important conversation to have, and such important work that you're doing, because we do it. I always try to say it's not me only.
Mm-mm. No.
It's just me too. I also
Yeah,
get a voice, right?
yeah.
I also get a
Me
seat at
too.
a table.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I think the overcorrection piece, thank you for
Mhm,
saying that. That's why I love,
mhm.
I mean, that is because I have 220. No, I don't. Oh my gosh. Now they're in their 30s. I have 2 30-year-old daughters, you know, in their 30s. That's crazy. I can't even believe I'm saying that. And a son I have twins, like I said. So yeah, they're like more, Mom, why are you asking Dad for permission?
Mhm. Yeah,
It's your
sure.
body.
Yeah,
Like you go get the
yeah,
work, the health, the whatever, you know, it's like,
yeah,
or
yeah,
why do you
yeah,
have to ask Dad if you can take a
yeah,
trip?
yeah.
It's just, I'm like,
Mhm,
oh, you know, well, because we're a team, you know, and they understand and they have beautiful relationships with their husbands and but it's different. It's very different.
yeah.
You know, they think for themselves. And I'm so proud of that. You know, I'm proud that they know that they have a voice. And in my community, Stronger Everyday Community, we equate voice with value.
Mm,
So when you know you have value, worth, and dignity, you really, I couldn't have a voice because I didn't even know who I was.
that's exactly right. Yep.
And I certainly didn't believe I had value, worth, and dignity.
Yeah.
So we work a whole lot, and it's a big part of my new book is about that. It's about finding your value
Yeah.
so you can know your voice.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
And then you can speak up, which now adding your work into it, even
Mhm,
that's why I love to learn. That's why we
mhm,
need your voice. We need all of our voices,
mhm,
because you're bringing into this Christian, as I've heard you share, the internal family system modality is, or theory is not per se Christian or non, but
mhm,
you and Kimberly Kim, your co-author, have authored it in the sense of bringing this spiritual framework to it.
mhm,
And that's why it was important to you. And I love that. Let me read what Richard Swartz, can I read it?
mhm. Sure.
I just love what Richard C. Swartz, the
Mhm.
developer of the internal family systems model of psychotherapy, that's its full name, he wrote this about your work, and it just made me smile. I mean, how great is that? How great is it to have
Mhm.
someone who's developed a model?
Yeah, he's a gracious man. Yeah, we were very grateful.
Gracious. Is there a spirit-led self within you that emanates love and can lead your inner and outer life? Is it possible to love your inner enemies in the same way that Jesus extolled you to love your outer ones?
Mm, mhm,
In this beautifully written book, Cook and Miller not only show you how to do that, but also make a strong case that doing so creates enormous inner transformation and peace. That's her goal, turning former enemies into valuable allies. And these are inside of us, right? These are inner enemies. I am thrilled with the way they have translated my work for a Christian audience and believe this book is an extremely important contribution to our culture's healing. And I would add to our Christian culture's healing. Oh my gosh. Do we need this? Pounding the table. So is that how you came to, like, if you could just give us a little bit more about internal family systems? You've shared a lot already, but the parts, but what else about it has led you to help us with our inner boundaries?
Well, so there's 3 categories of parts in the
Okay.
model, and this can be helpful to folks just to understand. So you've got, and I love it that it's sort of Trinitarian, right? We're sort of made in the image of
I
God, and
love
right,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
and exactly.
based on me. I love that.
Yeah, Richard Schwartz wasn't the developer of this, again, is not himself a Christian, but just when you read it, you just realize he stumbled upon something that really reflects the Gospels. So there's these 3 categories of parts, and it really makes sense when you think about it. We all have these manager parts, and these are the parts of us that are, want to prevent pain. They want to prevent us from making fools of ourselves. They're the parts of us that get out of bed, show up for work, produce, please, perform, achieve, worry, plan, plot, all the things, peacemake. And there's value in these parts of us. They can get extreme, and that's when they become problematic. But if they're in their healthy, balanced state, they're really valuable parts of us. Then the second category, these are called firefighters. These are the parts of us that put out the flames of pain when there's been pain. So these are the parts of us that want to drown out. They want to numb, escape, avoid. So they're going to grab the bottle of booze. They're going to start scrolling the social media, binge watch the Netflix, shop, whatever the things are that you find yourself doing to just shut yourself down, right? And we live in a culture where people kind of bounce between the two, that, it's like, go, 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 please, 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 work, 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 shut down. And again, neither of these categories is in their properly healthy, balanced state. The firefighters, actually, we need comfort. We need rest. We need pleasure, right? God created us for those things. So if they're healthy, when we're leading these parts of us versus the other way around, we're consciously, with conscious self-awareness, saying, oh, I've been working hard. I need to do something that would really restore me. And when we're leading ourselves, we choose something that's actually going to restore us versus something that's just going to numb the pain and not really help. And then the third category is the most important, not the most important, but it's one that needs attention the most, which are these exiled parts of us. And these are the tender, vulnerable parts of us that carry the burdens of pain. Yeah, you've got the
Map of the soul. I just wanted to show that for those of you who are listening, who are watching on YouTube, because Alison was so kind to let us go ahead and tape this. The book has this beautiful map, and then the study guide does as well. It's called Map of the Soul. So sorry.
Yeah, it's in the exiled parts of us often carry burdens of pain from the past, from when we were young children, even, that just got buried because we didn't have the skills to know how to deal with the pain at the time. And so what happens then is these other parts get extreme and are so busy coping and surviving that we never circle back to give these younger, more vulnerable parts of us the care that we need. So a lot of times the road to healing is really getting in touch with those exiled parts. And it's hard. It can be hard at first because they're the ones that carry the loneliness or the sadness or the fearfulness or the feelings of unworthiness. They can carry shame burdens. And so we kind of don't want to go there, but it's really the key to our healing is to restore those parts of us and bring them into the spirit-led leadership where they receive the care that they need. And then if you think about it, these are the young parts of us that when they are healed and unburdened, they become that playfulness, that what Jesus talked about, the just the trusting, tender parts of us that are actually beautiful. They need our protection, but we're actually protecting ourselves in a healthy way
Mhm.
instead of avoiding dealing with the hard things. So that's kind of a layout of the map, and it's just really beautiful work to kind of get to know your protectors, get to know the way you tend to numb out, and then start to get to know these really tender parts of you that many people don't want to face, but are actually the keys to your healing and wholeness.
Yeah, and I love the names. So it reminds
Yeah.
me so much. One of the theories that I fell in love with is narrative therapy, and I
Mhm.
have talked about that here
Mhm.
on the podcast so much because of being a writer, right? Being just I don't know, just being who I am. I just love the story aspect of it. Well, you're really doing that when because a big part of narrative therapy is to name something,
Mhm.
right? And that's what you're doing here.
Yeah.
You're naming, you're saying, oh, these are the managers that
Yeah.
I need to get to know these managers. I need to get to know the firefighters. I need to
Yeah.
find out who these exiled parts of me are. And in that, the most important part of your work is that we're not shaming those parts anymore.
Mhm.
And so a huge part of what I help our community do is to shift from shaming to gracing, right? To grace, to just get to know them. They're a cast of characters. They live inside of you, and that in and of itself to me just makes me take a deep breath.
Yeah.
That inner conflict,
Yeah.
like, and the inner voices. I mean, once again, I just heard, a few days ago, a client say, gosh, my mother's just in my head. She's just
Yeah.
in my,
Yep.
and I just lost my mom in August to COVID at 92. And so this is my first Mother's Day without her. And I do hear her voice, we do. And the
Mhm.
mama's voice is the most important voice ever. And so I just think getting to know and then begin to apply boundaries and the concepts of boundaries to your internal thoughts and feelings. What does that look like then? How do we
Mhm.
do that? How do we
Yeah.
apply an internal boundary?
Yeah, and so that's where kind of when I was alluding to this idea of where these parts of us get extreme,
Yeah.
we want to work with them to bring them within healthy boundary lines within our soul. We don't want them to go away. So, for example, a pleasing part of us,
Oh, good.
right? Yeah, it's a good go-to. There's good in that, right? It's not all bad. It is nice to be a kind person. It is nice to want to help others in need. But when they get extreme, we're pleasing needs that aren't ours to meet.
Right.
And so we want to bring that part back within healthy boundary lines. And so a lot of what we lay out in the book is this process of getting curious about it, almost like you would a young child. It's like parenting your child. You see these qualities in your child and you're like, that can be a good quality, but it can also really get you in trouble. And so we need to talk about it, and we need to help you understand how to set a gentle boundary with yourself. Let's say you've got a kid who loves school and is constantly talking out in class. How are you going to pause and just wait to speak out? Because that inquisitiveness is great, but you're also going to annoy the teacher, right? So and you don't want to shame the child, so you're kind of trying to help them learn these strategies for, okay, just when you want to raise that, when you want to speak out, just pause for 30 seconds and just wait. You're teaching yourself
Mhm.
this parts of yourself in the same way that you might teach a young child, right? Just to learn how to exist within proper healthy boundary lines, as opposed to just kind of driving you.
Yeah.
And it's just it's really gets at the fruit of the spirit of self-control, right? But
Yeah.
instead of, a lot of times when we think about self-control, it's like, I just got to control it. I got to shut it down. I got to beat myself up. It's a compassionate way of saying, this is a good part of me. It's there for a reason. God made it. It's gotten extreme. And so I've got to learn how to rein it in, get it at it, be able to, so that I'm leading myself. Okay, I've got that instinct to
Oh,
please. I don't actually have to please. Again, we talk about the 30-second pause.
yeah.
My co-author is a
Yeah.
type
Share
one.
about that. Go ahead.
She's a
Sorry.
reformer, and so she'll talk about how she'll wait 30. She'll give herself, I can't remember if she says like a day or 30 seconds or something before she offers a critique, right, or an idea for how to improve something. She just has learned to train herself. And it's not that she's shaming herself. She's just learning to bring that within healthy boundary lines.
Mhm. Oh, Allison, that's just so brilliant. We could have
Mhm.
another whole session on the
Yeah.
Enneagram and
Right.
your work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm married to a one. And so he and I, once we began to understand who we were, I'm a social two, he's a one, self-pres, it's like, wow, what a difference that makes.
Yeah.
in a relationship. And what it makes such a huge difference in understanding yourself. So what I keep hearing you say is just such a beautiful message of self-compassion towards yourself and offering yourself
Mhm.
grace. You know, I just
Mhm.
want listeners, please lean in, heart lifters here.
Mhm.
You know, take a step here, take a step back and hear what Alison is saying. Because what I hear you saying is you're actually telling us to care for our soul.
Mhm.
And I believe that is another, without being critical or judgmental, you know, just it is another deficit.
Mhm.
It's getting better. I do
Mhm.
think there's a lot of teaching coming out, a lot of beautiful voices coming out on contemplative practices, centering prayer, all the beautiful things that we can care for our soul. I also just want to inform everyone that Alison and Kim, I think you call her Kim, Kimberly,
Mhm.
the other author, you have such a great offering in this book, and it's the internal boundaries quiz. I
Mm.
took it and it was it was tough. It was close to home. I was like, I got some work to do. I got some more work to do. This is fun.
Mhm.
But, you know, you look at your emotions and you go, are they too close or are they too
Mhm.
far? So I love that you're always offering, like, I'm a repressor. So,
Mhm.
you know, mine are going to be too far. I got to bring them
Mhm.
close.
Mhm.
Oh man, all the things you're saying. So that's on page 13 when you get the book and you get it
Mhm.
on Kindle right away. You don't have to wait for one to come. But I want you to take that quiz. And I think we'll probably revisit this in a later
Mhm.
podcast with just me and the gang. And we'll talk about our internal boundaries quiz. And then we just you have to talk to me. This is so brilliant. Where's my big picture? You came up with this
Mm.
U-turn,
Mhm.
YOU hyphen turn, taking a U-turn. Alison, this was brilliant. I mean, this is so good. Is this, I should know the answer to this, but is this a part of internal family systems or is this all?
Yeah, we adapted it. So
You
they
adapted
call
it?
it, yeah,
Okay.
and Dick Schwartz, I believe, I, I think uses a U,
Oh,
like a really like a U-turn that you'd take on the road. Kind of
yeah.
the idea being you just, and then we started thinking about, oh, it's actually you're turning back to yourself. And we use the passage of scripture where Jesus says, before judging, take the plank out of your own eye. It's this idea of self-examination first. So that we kind of added that you. And then the steps in if you actually go through, if you're a therapist and you go through IFS training, there's a ton of steps. It's a very complicated,
Okay.
involved process. So we just, for the sake of kind of translating it, simplified it to these 5 key
Yeah.
steps.
Would you
That
mind
is
going through
something.
those? They're so good.
Sure. Yeah.
I
So
have a map. If, I'm sure you know them internally, but sometimes I forget.
yeah. Yeah. And then that's what the map is. So, for example, if you're noticing an extreme emotion, you're super angry and you can't figure out why. So you take it's a cue, take a U-turn. Let's get to know it. Right. And so the first step is to focus, which means to focus on the emotion. Now that seems counterintuitive to people because they're like, why would I want to focus, on my anger? But the
Oh,
idea is that when you focus on something, you bring it into view. And if you think about it, then you have to have some healthy distance from it. If you
yep.
can see it, it's not overtaking you. And actually, a lot of folks will say, well, I'm just angry. All of me is angry. And actually, as a therapist, what you're trying to do is help people see, it's a part of you. It feels like
Right.
all of you, but who you are at your core, whether it's depression, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's envy, is not that. That's
No.
a part of you that has kind of hijacked the system.
Yes.
And so you're trying to, when you focus on something, you are able, it's a great first step towards self-awareness of going, oh, if I can name it, as you said, name it, I can get a little distance from it. So that's kind of just the first step, is the beginning to name, this process of naming, focusing, um,
Yeah, and I like to say,
differentiating
I'll
from.
add here, like like a couple weeks ago, and I talked about this on the podcast. My mom's birthday was the first birthday without her. I went out, I just got really sad over the weekend, which was a few days later. And I was like, where is this sadness coming from? Like, this is weird. And I
Mhm.
was by myself, but I just encouraged everyone, my heart lifters, to just say, well, hi, sadness. There you are.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. I
Yeah.
would have tried to repress that
Mhm.
before or avoid it
Mhm.
or busy myself, as
Mhm.
you were alluding to before. But
Mhm.
instead I said, oh, and it was the first time I'd really ever like taken this. And it was just like, oh, hi. Hey, how are
Mhm.
you?
Mhm.
Come on in and have a seat.
Mhm.
And I took out some grounding tools that I use. And I just said, oh, hi, sadness. So I love that you are bringing like this to a U-turn. It's like adding more to it today. Thank you. Everyone's thanking you right now. So
Yeah.
focus on it. Right.
Yeah, I
Bring
love that.
love
I love that idea of, oh, hello, there you are, sort of.
here. Oh,
And
you're
again,
trying to
it's with
show
the,
up. Hmm.
yeah, we don't need to be fearful of these emotions. We
No.
don't need to, you kind of learn. And as you do more and more of that, you learn to trust. This is the process of trusting yourself, right? You learn to not be so kind
Hard
of
on you.
freaked out or hard on yourself when these emotions show up. So the second one is kind of also what you're alluding to, befriending, right? That
Oh,
could,
yes. Yeah.
right, sort of like welcoming. And the idea is, again, you're extending,
Mhm.
some people befriending, especially with emotions like anger, it's like, how do I really befriend that? The idea really is, the other word that we'll use is get curious. So
Love
the
that.
idea is just not to be self-condemning as you engage that emotion, because it is there for a reason, and we don't change in the context of criticism.
No, or
And
mm-mm.
yeah, so this is where we're trying to imply that, it feels like an enemy, but Jesus said to love our enemies. So what would it be like to love this part of me and be kind to this part of me right now that is feeling all these emotions? So that's the befriend. And then third, inviting God to draw near. And again, just this idea of, instead of, sometimes we feel like, okay, I got to get rid of all this stuff to go to God in prayer. It's just inviting God into the process. Yeah, just saying,
Here just for a second.
yeah,
You
of
alluded
course.
to it before. I feel like this step right here, or even the befriending step,
Mhm.
a new word to this community has also been spiritual bypassing. And you
Yeah,
bypassing
yeah,
before. Would you mind taking
Mhm.
a little U-turn right here and
Yeah.
just share your wisdom on how that can be damaging, actually, or how it could be hindrance, maybe is a
Yeah.
better word.
Yeah, you're right. And this is a good place to talk about it, because it isn't a process of saying, okay, now I notice the anger. Spiritual bypassing would be, God, take it away, take it somewhere magically to the sky, which is sort of the pray it away.
Right
It's
away.
not that. It's inviting God in,
Mhm.
and it's saying, God, I'm angry. Help me understand the anger. It's a very different, that's emotional health. That's a process of, you gave me these emotions and I'm trying to understand what it means that I'm angry.
Mhm.
And maybe this other person did a terrible thing to me, but a lot of times we're like, I feel like it's an overreaction. What is going on inside of me? So it's a process of bringing God into that experience of self inquiry, versus a lot of what we get taught, which is the spiritual bypassing thing of, you know, God, just take it away,
Wave your
or
wand.
wave a magic wand, or I'll just say a scripture over it. And it's like, it's a bypass. It bypasses the important information
Oh, that's it.
that emotion has to give us. And,
That's it.
these emotions are what we call, in IFS, we call trailheads. They're signposts that there's a trail to follow to deeper self-discovery.
Oh,
And so and God wants to go with us on that journey, not pluck us up out of that journey.
I
So,
just thank you. Thank you so
yeah.
much, because it's so critical. And I feel like you are hijacking is another word. You're like
Mhm.
hijacking, but you're bypassing something that actually will lead you to the freedom you actually are desiring.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And instead of shaming or like saying, if I just read, this is what I mean, I hear these things, these are not made up.
Mhm.
I stopped having my devotional time in the morning. I'm
Mhm.
not reading the scripture enough. You know,
Right.
I mean, I know people that have are beautiful people. They've read the word, inside and out. I mean, I've been walking with
Mhm.
Jesus 40 years.
Mhm.
I know the word inside out,
Yep.
but I never understood. I never integrated, was never taught, I guess,
Mhm.
to integrate like what you're bringing to us, the
Yeah.
faith and the psychology.
Yeah, and so that's the other extreme. So we can spiritually bypass, and then that we burn out because we're not actually
Mhm.
healing our emotions, and we just end up frustrated with God. And then you go to the other extreme and say, well, I'm not going to read my Bible or pray at all. And that's not what we're after either, right?
Nope.
That's again the overcorrection. And what we're after is this integrated,
Yes.
being a whole person, acknowledging all these different parts of us and all these different ways that God made us, and bringing God into that process.
Mhm.
So at that point, you might, sometimes I will the next step is to unburden and integrate, but really these first three are kind of the key ones. At that point I might say, man, I can't figure out what's going on with me. I don't know why I'm so angry. And so I might even pray for that part of me. But again, it's very different. I might say, God, this part of me is angry. And you see these prayers in the Psalms,
Yes, you do.
what help me understand.
Why am I
That's,
so disheartened?
yes, that's such a different prayer from God, forgive me and take it away, and it's not to say that we shouldn't ask for forgiveness, but
Oh,
but
yes.
in it's seeking to understand type of prayer. We can also say, or while I'm in pain and I'm struggling so much, Lord, help these parts of me, again, getting at the boundaries. You talk about when someone's grieving, let's talk about grief. You still need to show up for your job, right? And so instead of exiling that grief, you say, Lord, help me find a place inside where that grief can sort of live without just taking over all of, so I can still show up and be with you. And there's also a part of me that's carrying grief. We're very multifaceted, people. We can do
We don't
this.
give ourselves enough credit.
Yeah.
We don't. And I think that
Yeah.
just speaks clearly. I mean, I've been doing
Yeah.
that for months since my mother passed. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
how do I grieve? I don't
Yes.
even know what I'm grieving.
Yeah.
I knew it would be complicated grief because I had a
Yep.
complicated relationship with her,
Yep.
So, okay, today I'm very overwhelmed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just going to carry this overwhelming
Yeah.
feeling with me. But I think
Yeah.
the beauty of the journey that you're sharing is really the journey of emotional, what I would say, health and emotional maturity. It's, as you say so distinctly in the book, it's not letting your emotions control you.
Yeah.
You control your emotions.
Yeah.
Get to know them well.
Yeah.
I think there are foes when we keep them too far,
That's
when
right.
we are afraid of them.
Yeah.
What did they say, Allison? I mean, I've read this, I've never gotten to the source, but over 34,000 emotions is what we particularly
Yeah.
have. I mean, that
Yeah.
wheel of emotion, the clutch chicken,
Yeah.
all that,
Yeah.
so I mean, man, what a game changer that was for me personally. And then in my work with others,
Mm-hmm.
it's just anger.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unbridled anger, different
Mm-hmm.
story.
That's right.
But
That's
even
right.
unbridled anger in the midst of the damaging
Mm-hmm.
tornado of that,
Mm-hmm.
what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
Where's this coming from?
Yeah.
Oh, hello, tornado.
Yeah.
It's just, I love
Yeah.
how you encourage us to befriend them and to invite God into the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
so
Exactly. I love that. That's great.
I say, welcome God into the wise. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
say. Just welcome him in. It
Yeah.
made sense to me years ago when I was in a tough spot. And it was like, God, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to welcome you into this hot mess because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do. Whew, help me,
Mm-hmm.
help me. So then I just love, how do we then unburden? I think we kind of already said it, but just,
Yeah. Yeah, and
and
there's a process of unburdening when you actually are doing IFS therapy that's very involved, and I don't really encourage that necessarily, especially when there's deep trauma, to be done by yourself.
no,
But in the book, what we talk about is just this idea of when you get to the root, you get to that vulnerable part of you that's been carrying the burden, usually from the past, usually meaning we've made
yeah,
from an event as a child that was too complicated for us to understand. So my parents, let's say this isn't my story, but let's say your parents got divorced,
yeah.
and as a child, you took on a burden of shame. Oh, I wasn't worth
Mm,
their right, and
yeah,
it's
worth
not
them fighting for.
true.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not what is that, but it's a burden. When you get to that, there's this release of that burden, and to use your word of narrative, replacing that with it's just such a beautiful feeling when those young parts of you
Mm,
sense the power of the Holy Spirit, the Spirit itself, and just realize, oh, it wasn't because of me. And you replace the lie with the truth, really, is what you're doing. Yeah, and it's very powerful. There's a lightness that comes, and then the integration piece is then that part of you is freed
mhm.
to live within your soul, live within your system more free. That all that energy that had been wrapped up in shame is now free to, like I said, often these are playful parts, these are joyful
Yes,
parts.
skipping and
These
hopping
are,
again, right?
yeah,
I remember
exactly.
the day I skipped out of church. I was like,
Yeah,
what did I just do?
yeah,
But it
you're
was, I
free.
guess, yeah, it just, I
Mhm.
couldn't, it just came. It's
Yeah.
like the wholeness, the healing was just, it just came. And I
Yeah.
want everyone listening to
Yeah.
come home to that.
I agree.
You know,
Yeah.
I know you do. I know you do. And then
Mhm.
integrate. So just the closure of the back to the U-turn is where how do we integrate then? This is the beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's you kind of just touched on it. It's where that then you have access to those resources now in new ways.
Yeah.
Um, and also
Yeah.
as there's less shame and there's less of that those kind of painful memories, these protective parts also get to be reintegrated in more helpful ways.
Yes.
Right. So instead of the part of you always being like, I have to please other people because I'm not worthy of love, all of a sudden, oh, I am worthy of love. So now all that energy that you were putting into pleasing other people, that part of you can be redirected to go, oh, how can I start a ministry that is actually something that's coming from deep inside of me? It's not about pleasing everybody else, but it's really going to help people, actually,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's so perplexing and freeing and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of the above. It just
Yeah.
brings so
Yeah.
much freedom and so much joy. Okay, I want to ask you, I know we're coming to the close. I have a
Yeah.
million other things, but oh well. But you talked about something, it's on page 39. If you have the book already, or if you're getting the book, or if you got it on Kindle, 39. You write about baptized
Oh, yeah.
imagination. I'm smiling so big because I can't wait to dig into that
Mhm.
in my heart journal myself. I just can't.
Mhm.
It's new to me. And I've been trying to teach on imagination, and several other guests have spoken about imagination. But when I heard baptized imagination, I was like, oh, this is it.
Mhm.
You talk about how this is an integral component of spiritual growth and formation. Oh my gosh, Allison, teach us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a term we got from C.S. Lewis. And if you think about
Yes.
a baptized imagination, I can't think of a better example. If you think about the Narnia tales, right? That was all his imaginary world creating a beautiful narrative that helps us understand God better. And so that's where we got the term. And when you're doing this work, what the idea of imagination kind of lives more in the the creative brain versus the thinking brain. And often we're trying to approach ourselves from that thinking brain. And then this is
Yes.
another thing we've learned in modern Christianity. It's like thoughts, facts, faith,
Yes.
feelings, right? So
Ooh.
right, the problem is that what there's actually not a hierarchy. Both are important, and we're always trying to talk ourselves into feeling a different way. It doesn't work when we're able to imagine these
Mhm.
parts of us. When you kind of do the guided meditation. One of my free downloads is a guided prayer. You can kind of imagine, what does that angry part of you look like? What is it? And you get these amazing kind of, not everybody, it doesn't happen for everybody, but most of us, kind of the creative part of our brain kicks in and sort of is like, it feels like this, this, and you really get a sense of, oh yeah, that. And what's happening is both you're gaining understanding, but also more of your brain is firing,
Oh,
literally. You've
so
got your right
high.
brain
Yeah.
linking over. You're not just making sense of it analytically, you're actually accessing some other part of your brain. And all of the trauma work is showing that a lot of that is where the synapses, and the neural pathways allow more
Mhm.
um, change, real deep,
Real
meaningful
deep
change to occur.
metanoia.
So,
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the knowing, the deeper knowing versus just the head knowledge, although it's all kind of in our
And
system,
that's
but
integration though. You're
that's
asking us,
integration.
you're asking your clients and your readers and
Yeah.
all of us here to integrate this
Yeah.
beautiful mind and
That's
brain,
right.
both sides
That's right.
that God
Yes.
created. And I think that's what
Yes.
it's William Paul Young, The Shack, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Or, C.S. Lewis. Oh, good Lord, have mercy. Tolkien. All of these.
Tolkien. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of these brilliant
Yeah.
baptized imaginations. And
Yes.
I think we have such I've used this word a lot today, deficits, but I am asking God,
Yeah.
to give me now more increased baptized
That's
imagination.
great.
My agent years ago, my literary agent was like, if you could just write therapy in fiction,
Mhm.
people would get it probably. And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, that's a great goal. That's a great
Yeah.
goal. And so I just thank you so much for bringing
Yeah.
that into our conversation again. And I want to
Mhm.
encourage, because I know a lot of people that I know, a lot
Mhm.
of our community, our heart lifters, they feel guilty or they feel woo-woo.
Mm.
Kind of woo-woo, you know? And
Yeah.
I'm certified aromatherapy, so I use
Mhm.
therapeutic grade essential oils in
Mhm.
healing trauma through the sense of
Mhm.
smell. It's a lot like EMDR and a lot of other modalities. But boy, when you first present that, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I
Well,
can do that.
well, that's why in the book we took great pains to go through all the places where the Bible is filled with metaphors and imagery. Jesus uses parables. He tells stories. He rarely answers a question head on. He almost always tells a story.
He does.
That's because that story draws you into a deeper meaning. And so that's why we in the book we have all these little like sidebars trying to, because people
So
are like
good.
that's weird, and it's like, well, no, actually it's really very scriptural. It's the language of some of these things that we can't quite get with our scientific brain, our analytical brain. We need the power of these stories and these images
We do.
to access a deeper truth. So thank you so much for your encouragement. This conversation has really meant a lot.
Oh, because it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good because I think at that moment too, Allison, when I see people's imaginations get baptized by the
Yeah.
Spirit,
Yeah.
that's where the weeping starts,
Yeah. Yeah.
where the
Yeah.
you can see the pressure fall,
Yeah. Yes.
you can
Yeah.
see the countenance
Yeah.
lift. That's
Yeah.
that's the heart lift I talk about. It's like
Yeah.
when you can get to your truest true you
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and exhale.
Yeah.
And that is what boundaries, that's what your book does. And
Hmm.
I am going to reread it and reread it and reread it.
Hmm.
I looked because I always say boundaries of the soul, but it's boundaries for your soul. And so I wanted to correct myself there.
It's
But thank
great.
you so much. Any parting words for us as we're trying to become baptized in our imagination and have these beautiful U-turns in our lives?
Oh no, I'm just grateful for your work, it's just such a gift to me that that this offering meant so much to you. So I really appreciate that. We really did try to prayerfully craft it in such
Oh,
a
yeah.
way as to help folks really, you know, go dive into this deeper understanding of the self. And it's a powerful journey, and I'm just really grateful to have had this chance to talk with you more about it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been an honor. And I know everyone listening is so grateful. And we will be talking. If you would give me permission, I'd like to talk a little bit more about it on a podcast all
Oh,
by
sure.
itself with
Of
my
course.
community and
Yeah,
get questions and answers and that
of
kind of thing
course.
with them, because we didn't get to the constellation of parts. We didn't get to
Yeah.
what are the burdens. You have these three
Yeah.
belief burdens, feeling burdens, and physical burdens that, oh my goodness, we're going to have a whole podcast on just
Good.
those burdens.
Good. Great.
And so where can everyone find you? It'll be in the show notes, but just
Sure.
give us a quick place.
Yeah, my website is just my name, AlisonCookPhD.com. And I have a weekly newsletter I send out every Thursday with
It's
just little
great.
blog posts. And then I'm on social media again at Alison Cook PhD. And I do a lot of what's been really fun is I've been doing more Q&A and more kind of interaction through that medium, which has been fun because it's just neat to see people beginning to bring these two things together. I'm
Oh,
very
I love
grateful
it.
to have been a part of that. So yeah, come join me.
I have. So I invite everyone else
Great.
to as well. And be sure to get her newsletter because it's easy. Is that a
Oh,
nice
good.
way? It's
Sure.
digestible,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
easily
Yeah.
digestible, and I come
Yeah.
quickly with a practical takeaway.
Yeah. I try to make them practical. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
both, I'm very highly practical. So
Yes.
maybe that's
Me too.
why I relate to you as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much. And
Yeah.
everyone, please go out and get your copy. And like, if you can't wait like me, I got it on Kindle right away. So Boundaries for Your Soul. And thank you. Be very
Thanks.
blessed. And may
Thank you.
your ministry just continue to expand so that so many can be free.
Thank you. Appreciate it.